Well, now, who do we have here?
I am with W.T.F Nation Radio and U.S. Army W.T.F Moments. Definitely want to thank you very much for your service. I'm a veteran too. Spent 17 years in the Army, and Chuck, something I know that we might have passed each other, and I definitely know that we don't know each other from this. But in 2010, when you went over to Pearl Harbor, I was there with my mother-in-law because I was stationed in Hawaii, and we went to that remembrance in 2010. I also went to the 70th in 2011.
You've been there to the remembrance at Pearl Harbor.
Yes, sir. The one in 2010. I was there on in 2010. Yes, sir. And 2011.
I'm told now. Somebody told me that last year, at December 7th, there were no survivors at Pearl Harbor. The first time they said that that has happened.
Yes,
Uh,
yes, that is true.
I'll maybe have to see if I can't get back there. Uh, uh, I have a very good friend. In fact, I was very influential in getting him a job there at Pearl Harbor. I forget the name of the guy that used to be the lead historian there. He retired, and now this guy, his name is Jason Okrasa, and he is
Mhm.
now uh, the head. What do you call him? Guy there that to organize and keep that remembrance going. So if you go there again, uh, ask for Jason. Tell him Chuck sent you.
I will, Chuck, and God willing, you do make it there this year on the 85th, anniversary of the attack, sir.
Yeah, I maybe ought to go back there. I haven't been there. It's been a long, long time now. Uh, I don't imagine much is still the same, but in my memory and stuff, it would bring back all of those days again. Uh, there's hardly a day go by that I don't at least think of it once or so. Something like that will stay with you forever.
I understand that, Chuck, and I'm glad that you brought that up because this year for the National Memorial Day concert that's going to be broadcast on PBS, they are going to be celebrating the 85th anniversary of the surprise attack on American soil at Pearl Harbor, which brought us into World War II. And the National Memorial Day concert is a night of remembrance, and it brings together the nation to honor the service of generations of our men and women in uniform and military families. And, I know it's going to be hosted on May 24th. And today, here on U.S. Army WTF Moments and WTF Nation Radio, I would like to go ahead and introduce U.S. Navy veteran Earl Chuck Kohler, who fought back against the Japanese on December 7th, 1941, and is one of only 11 remaining veteran survivors of that day. Well, hey, sir, I want to talk to you real quick about, your background and your history and what brought you and I'm glad for a great 102 years of your life. I'm glad you are still here with us. But from my understanding is that in 1941, you were 16 years old and, you enlisted in the Navy. And I wanted to find out what the circumstances were that you had that allowed you to enlist in the Navy at such an early age around that time.
Yeah, I was 2 months and 1 week past my 17th birthday. You have to be 17. You
Oh,
can join the Navy at that time. You could join the Navy, but you had to have your parents' permission. I don't know. I don't know. I got my mother, and she knew that I felt that I needed to do this. And of course, the winds of war were blowing, and if I wouldn't hadn't went in the Navy, I would have got drafted into the Army, and I maybe wouldn't be here today. So I think joining the Navy to me is one of the best decisions I ever made. and it serves me well even yet today. The
Oh,
things that
that's
I learned and do there while I was in the Navy. Back then, if we were on watch and we saw someone, that maybe shouldn't be, our rules of engagement were that you shouted out, "Halt! Who goes there, friend or foe?"
mhm.
And we decided on our own that if you're going to do that before you get through with what you're saying, there'll be a bit of a fire, and that'll be it for you. So we decided that you shoot first and ask
Mhm.
questions later.
I wish I wish those rules of engagement could have happened during my time when I was in Afghanistan and Iraq because it would have saved a lot of people from some attacks out there. I understand that. Chuck, you did mention that you were afraid that you were going to be drafted into the Army, so you joined the Navy. Did you think that you were going to be in wartime service, even joining the Navy, or that you were going to be seeing direct combat the way that you did?
Well, I wasn't facing a draft because they didn't draft until you were 18. I was only 17 at the time, but a neighbor had joined the Navy, and he came back on leave, and I got a chance to visit with him. And he was telling me how exciting it was, and how he was sailing around, all these different places and stuff. And so I thought, boy, that's for me. That's what I want to do. And I was able to. My mother knew how badly I wanted to do this. You can imagine it's maybe pretty hard for a mother to send her 17-year-old kid off to war, but she did that, and it just it it's
Yeah.
when I made it through Pearl Harbor, all through World War II, and got out, and I figured, boy, if I can get through this when I'm 17 years old, and then gradually going a little older, I can maybe handle anything that they throw at me. And that has worked out real well all my life.
That's the absolute truth. Going through something that young and horrifying at that young, the rest of your life, you've got it not on the easy street, but you know that you can make it through there. Now, you were on Fort Island when the attack happened that Sunday morning, and you mentioned you were on guard duty. If my understanding was you were writing a letter to your mother when the attack occurred, or when you heard the planes coming through.
I was in the duty section assigned the 0800 to 1200 watch that morning, so it happened on my watch. So I
Wow.
had to tell the young people today, be prepared for the unexpected.
Yep. No, I understand that. Understand that. In fact, I was actually when I was in Hawaii and mentioning about my time there, I did several classes over at Fort Island, and I saw several of the hangars that still have, the bullet holes from the fighter jets that were coming in, and it is, a horrifying experience for, if it happening live, but even, 70 years after that happened when I was there, it was still a remembrance of, you got to be prepared for the unexpected because we didn't know, on September 11th that was going to happen. And I bet you didn't think that was going to be happening to you on that Sunday, were you?
Well, it was a disastrous morning,
Hmm.
but at the same time, for me, it was there was a excitement. All this stuff was going on, and you're right there with a front row seat, boy, and seeing that. Not only that, but to get as involved as I did, uh, it's an experience that I will never ever forget.
So take me through that day. From my understanding, you ended up grabbing a 50 caliber machine gun and then mounting it and shooting at all the planes as they were coming through and attacking Pearl Harbor. Is that correct, sir?
Yeah, once we got that 50 caliber machine gun mounted, and I started firing, the other guy that was with me, since he was already in the airplane mounted machine gun, he fired first. But I could tell he was firing right at him, and that don't work. You got to fight. You got to put that bullet where you think the plane will be when the two of them come together. And
Mm-hmm.
I knew that from hunting back on the farm. I used to shoot jackrabbits on the run, Chinese ringneck pheasants on the fly with a 22 caliber rifle. You know, and
Mm-hmm.
you gotta learn the enemy's habits. Or if you're hunting, you got to learn that game's habits. Or if you're fishing, you learn what the fish do and stuff like that. So I I tried to put myself in there. What would I do if I was trying to make the most of my time here? And so it pretty well worked out that way.
I have to ask, was there any fear that you wouldn't make it past that day when the attack was happening?
Once I got that 50 caliber machine gun and started firing, then they didn't. None of them come back to Ford Island anymore to make strafing runs or anything like that. They all went elsewhere. Yeah,
Oh.
cast about 50 years later, they had rounded up found as many of those Japanese pilots they possibly could who had participated in that raid, and they were interviewing them. And they asked us, they brought them back to Pearl Harbor for that anniversary. They were interviewing them, and they asked us one part, what part did you yourself play in that raid? He said, I was the lead pilot of a group of aircraft. Our assigned targets were the airplanes and hangars on Ford Island. You know, he said, when
Mm-hmm.
I went in for my first run, dropped my bomb machine gun, they didn't see a soul. But he said by the time I had came around, was lining up for a second machine gun run, there was so much fire coming up that I turned and went elsewhere.
And thank God they did because, they stopped the attack that day and then we entered the war that day. After the Japanese turned around and left, what was the recovery mission like with all of those that through all the ships and the airplanes that were attacked? How did you get through that day, the rest of the day, carrying and helping out your fellow sailors?
Well, we immediately tried to salvage what we could. We tried to get the planes that weren't afire away from those that were afire,
Hmm.
to do whatever we could to salvage what could be salvaged, what wasn't already burning or shot up or something like that. And after that, then we rapidly try to get ourselves ready. We expected there would be landing parties,
Hmm.
and if they had been, they would have most likely taken the island. But
Yeah.
because we weren't prepared for landing parties, we just for some reason they just never expected that would happen there.
I
But
get
uh,
that.
if it's a time of war, expect the unexpected.
Hmm. Living that day, after that day, and then you continued service all the way up until the Japanese surrendered. What motivated you to continue serving in the Navy up until the end of World War II?
I was, you know, involved in the event that got us into the war, the first battle of the war, and my last participation in a military act at the end of the war. I was stationed there on Majuro Atoll in the Marshall Islands.
Hmm.
And the Marshall Island is a two-chain affair. We had the base on Majuro on the one leg of the island, and the Japanese had a place called over on the chain called Ailing Laplap. Ailing Laplap, I guess it was.
Yes,
Uh,
sir.
in Whenever the tide was low, we could see the top of the palm trees on the island where the Japanese was. We were that close, but
Jeez.
but we didn't. we started the island hopping campaign, and instead of trying to take a base away from the enemy that they already had started, we would just bypass them and shut off their supply. And
Hmm.
then pretty soon they couldn't get fuel for their aircraft, they couldn't get ammunition, they couldn't get food or anything. Uh, and I remember my last participation in an active war there was to go to Ailing Laplap and to haul down the Japanese flag and raise the American flag. And then after that, they had been abandoned by their own country. The only way they could get anything into them was by submarine at night. And after we went there and accepted their surrender, then sent a cargo ship there with food and whatever they might need. And I think eventually sent a ship there to take them back to their homeland because the enemy had just, Japan had just deserted, left them there. They had abandoned them.
Jeez. That's the horrible parts of the war. There's sometimes, and I mentioned that because even after they surrendered, at least you acted humanely, sent them food and sent them back, but it treated them as human beings, even though, the atrocities that their country directed them to do upon us. At least there was some humanity that you guys showed them, throughout at the end of the war. And that says more about the character of the United States service member than that does anything else about any of the enemies we've fought. That we have at least a character to say that those people are human beings and treat them with respect and dignity. Which, yeah.
I remember this one Japanese that had been captured early in the war, and he was sent back here to the United States. I think they had a prisoner of war camp in Missouri or somewhere like that, and they sent him there. And he said they treated me better there. Even though I'm the enemy, they treated me better than my own country treated me when I was in the service there.
And that's what happens, we do have the best military and we will destroy any enemy that causes harm against us, but we will still treat them with respect and like humans. And that's why I love America because we are the best at doing both. Um, so Chuck, I want to ask, right after the war, you go back home and you stayed at your you end up moving out to California. What was it like being a World War II vet, moving out to California and starting your life after your service?
Well, they had came to me there on Majuro and said, "We want to send you back to the University of Oklahoma for
Hmm.
some advanced training." So I thought, well, that's a chance to get back to the U.S. So I said, "Oh, I'm all for that. I'll go." They come back and said, "There's one problem. You have to have at least 2 years of service left, to go there." And of course, I had enlisted when I was 17, and so my service ended on my 21st birthday.
Oh, wow.
So I extended for 2 years in order to go back to the university there.
Hmm.
And I'm, and then the war ends. The fighting stopped on about the 15th of August, and I think they signed the surrender on the 2nd of September. MacArthur, they wanted to make conditions. He said it will be unconditional. You
Hmm.
won't set the conditions. We will. It will be an unconditional surrender. So
Yeah.
they finally accepted that. But to me, I look back and that serving through the war, before, all during, and after the war, made me so fiercely independent that I have used that all through my life.
Let me ask, because a lot of us with that are post 9/11 veterans, there was a stigma about talking about our war experience and some of the struggles, especially the mental struggles that we suffered through after we either, returned back to the United States or after we got out of the service. What stigmas did you experience when you returned and got out and with what you saw, obviously it affected you, and you were mentioning you stayed fiercely independent, but was there any stigmas about, talking about your experience and talking about what you saw on December 7th?
Well, when I came back, the war had been all of the parades and all of the hurrah and 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 all that stuff was already over.
Hmm.
So we were now looked at more as a competitor for the jobs, the housing, the new cars, the available women, whatever the case may be, and so we weren't as welcomed as those who got home right after the war were.
It took you a while for you to share your story publicly about you being here on Pearl Harbor. Um, what made you change your mind to educate the public about sharing your story and telling us about what transpired on that day?
Well, I like I say, once they're gone, they have no voice of their own. Your sunken shipmates and fallen comrades, whatever the case may be. And if nobody speaks up for them, then they're completely forgotten.
Hmm.
And these guys, all of those people, you know, uh, a lot of them were, uh, well, at that time at Pearl Harbor, most of the guys in the Navy were career military. You know, we had one guy there that was approaching 60th birthday. He was a chief petty officer. And when you turn 60, the Navy kicks you out. They don't want you anymore. So
Yep.
he was real. What was he going to do? He'd maybe been in the Navy for all of his life. Uh, he was so happy when the war started because he knew that he would get to stay in the Navy at least until the war ended.
Are there any friends of yours that you want us to remember that you served with on Pearl Harbor that are no longer here with us?
They say there's less than 12 of us left now, and
Yes,
I'm
sir.
the only one here in California. And I don't think I knew any of the others while we were in the service.
Now, over on California, you've got your own little memorial that you do every December 7th. Can you tell us about what you have been doing over in California to remember to commemorate the attacks?
Yeah, we have that beacon light
Hmm.
atop Mount Diablo that Admiral Nimitz came here in 1964 and flipped the switch that relit that beacon, and he suggested that we do it every December 7th to honor and remember all those who lost their lives at Pearl Harbor. So, so that beacon has become one of my pet projects. I have spent a lot of time uh, and a lot of effort. Uh, we got that beacon restored to better than new, and we have a maintenance fund set up now that people can contribute to keep that beacon lit. So they also light it on Veterans Day and on Memorial Day. So it's lit 3 times a year now. And I think that's even better because the more that we can get that beacon involved, the longer people will keep it lit.
We'll spread the word about that, but that is on top of Mount Diablo. Is that correct, sir?
Let me share something with you.
Yes, sir.
At the top of Mount Diablo stood a relic of the past, an old navigational beacon whose light was fading fast. But its purpose had been recycled, its meaning now anew, but its beam was rapidly fading. Was there anything anyone could do? Survivors' efforts had gone unanswered, sons and daughters' efforts too. Then a younger survivor got involved to see what he might do. Soon his efforts brought about new meanings as he got more and more of the community involved, with so many now working together. All previous problems were soon solved. Now that beacon shines more brightly, even more so than before, and we hope it will always do so, now and forevermore. Those victims applaud and salute each of you for what you have done. Navy, Marine Corps, Army, Air Corps, Coast Guard, each and every one. And the few of us who still survive are eternally grateful too, knowing those lost will be remembered because of all of you. When our time comes to join with them again, we'll just be moving on, but we can go remembering your promise to us that even after all the survivors have gone, in honor and in remembrance of all those lost, the beacon lighting will go on.
Amen to that. I hope it does go on. I hope it goes on for the rest of time in eternal. Eternal. I hope it does. I truly do hope it does. That is very inspirational. Love that poem, sir. Absolutely love that poem. Did you write that, or was that somebody who wrote, or would somebody else write that, sir?
But let me tell you another one. From within those rusting hulls of sunken ships,
Yes, sir.
reminders of what used to be, echo calls to remember from those there entombed that freedom is never free. For those who answer duty's call in the air, on land, or at sea, where liberties and freedoms come under threat, that's where we choose to be. We all gave some, and some gave all, those liberties and freedoms to save, but those valued treasures can only remain if protected by the gallant and the brave. The bombs blast, the cannons roar, the sights and sounds of battle, the cries of the wounded, the sighs of the dying, amid bursts of machine gun rattle, the fires, flames, the burning airplanes, the sight of sinking ships with death raining from the skies right before our eyes. How could we ever forget? Some manned guns put up a fight, a victory hoped to gain. We stood our ground, then with many went down, and down there they shall forever remain. Those shipmates and buddies, forever they're lost, never to breathe air again, must always be honored and forever remembered, or their sacrifices will have been in vain. Some saw it all, got involved, a few in our own way, and for those who did and still survive, it's like only yesterday. We've grown old, tried to move on, things we've tried to forget, but try as we will, those memories linger still, and for some, it's not over yet. Our season pass, the time goes by. Then comes each 7th of December, where there always be those who will care enough not only to remember, but to remember, and then come here to Cal State East Bay campus on that night and light the light.
That was
Then
beautiful, and
comes
that hit me right in my chest, right in the dead in the middle. Hit me right in the field, sir. Chuck, we're gonna wrap this up here. I just want to ask if you have any words of wisdom that you would like to pass along to us veterans that served after your heroic service, and for those that are currently serving in the military right now.
well, it gets to a point where people kind of forget, but but if ever, and we don't see many people in uniform anymore like we used to, but whenever, if ever I do see a veteran anywhere in uniform, I make it a point to thank them for their service and tell them how much it means to me that they're following in the footsteps of those who went on before them.
That's awesome, sir, and we appreciate your thanks. We appreciate you and your heroic service. We appreciate you coming on here. Once again, the National Memorial Day concert will be on PBS Monday, or excuse me, Sunday, May 24th. And there is going to be a very accomplished actor that's going to portray you on that show that evening, and you're going to be front row in Washington, D.C. to see the concert. We are more than looking forward to seeing this, and it has been an absolute honor to speak with you today, Chuck. And I hope that you are able to get out again out to Pearl Harbor, and I hope that we are able to speak to you for a lot longer, sir.
Well, everybody's doing so much that those of us, myself, yourself, who are going to be involved, we've got to do everything we can to make it the best it can possibly be so that people will remember it.
We will do our best, sir, and just as you have done your best, we will definitely try to remember, sir. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for staying here for our interview with Chuck Kohler, one of the 11 remaining Pearl Harbor survivors, a great World War II vet, and a fantastic American. This is Cody.